Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
I had been planning the garage sale for weeks. It wasn't just about cleaning out old furniture or boxes stacked in the attic. The goal was simple: raise money for the local animal shelter. They were running out of space and supplies, and every dollar counted. I thought it was the sort of thing neighbors would appreciate: community spirit, helping a cause, and maybe picking up a bargain along the way. The first morning started off perfectly. Tables were set along the driveway, the garage door rolled up, and signs with bright letters pointed down the street. People stopped by, laughing, carrying little treasures they found. Kids from next door were even selling lemonade. It felt like a normal Saturday, and for once, the neighborhood looked alive instead of sterile and quiet. Then Karen showed up. I knew something was off the second her SUV screeched to a halt in front of my house. She swung the door open so hard it nearly hit the car parked beside her. She stomped down the driveway, heels clicking like a countdown to trouble. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she barked, hands planted firmly on her hips. "It's a garage sale," I said, as calmly as I could. "Raising money for the shelter downtown. They really need help." Her face twisted like I'd insulted her. "This is unapproved commerce. You can't just set up shop in the middle of our community without board approval." "Did you even bother to check the regulations?" "Karen," I said, trying not to laugh, "it's a garage sale. People have them everywhere. No one's complaining. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves." "I'm complaining," she snapped, voice sharp enough to stop a couple browsing near the table of old books. They froze, pretending to look at paperbacks but obviously listening. This kind of thing lowers property values. People parking all over, blocking sidewalks, strangers walking around. "It's dangerous." "Dangerous?" I asked. "For who?" "You." Her lips tightened. "You'll hear from the board." She spun around, nearly knocking over the lemonade stand as she stormed back to her car. I thought that was the end of it. Just Karen being Karen. But by evening, an envelope was taped to my front door. "Violation notice. Unapproved commerce fine. $750 additional penalty. Suspension of trash services until compliance confirmed." I read it 3 times, stunned. They weren't even pretending to play fair. Suspending trash pickup over a garage sale? The next morning, the HOA president, Greg, showed up at my door. Greg was the kind of guy who always wore polo shirts tucked into pressed khakis, even on weekends. His smile was fake, the kind where his lips moved but his eyes stayed cold. "Morning," he said smoothly. "I assume you've received the notice." "Yeah, and it's ridiculous," I shot back. "A garage sale for charity doesn't warrant a $750 fine, let alone suspending trash pickup." He adjusted his collar like my words were just dust he could brush off. "Rules exist for a reason. Allow one sale, and suddenly every driveway becomes a flea market. We can't have that chaos." "This isn't about chaos. This is about Karen not liking me. She made a scene, and now the board's punishing me." Greg leaned a little closer, lowering his voice. "Karen brought it up. Yes, but the board supported her concerns. If you have a problem, you can always attend the next meeting. Until then, the fine stands. And trash pickup. Well, that's non-negotiable." I stared at him, half in disbelief, half in rage. "You're holding my trash hostage?" He smiled again, thin and smug. "Compliance encourages order." When he walked away, I wanted to slam the door so hard it rattled the windows. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started calling neighbors. Most were sympathetic but nervous. I saw what happened. One whispered, "But you know how Karen gets. She's got Greg in her pocket. If I speak up, I'll be next." Another said, "I'd sign something to support you. But, well, I've got a project waiting on board approval." I can't risk them denying it. Fear had already spread. By the following week, I learned just how deep their pettiness went. A new notice was posted on the HOA bulletin board, effective immediately. No external gatherings of any kind without board approval. That meant no block parties, no neighborhood BBQs, no simple get-togethers in the cul-de-sac without Karen's blessing. She strutted around the neighborhood like she'd won a war. Every time I saw her, she gave me that smug smile, like she was daring me to fight back. I decided I would. One evening, I stood in my driveway with a clipboard, determined to gather signatures for a repeal. A couple neighbors walked by, and I waved them over. "Hey, this rule is insane. Would you sign a petition to overturn it?" Before they could answer, Karen's voice cut through the air. "Solicitation without approval. That's another violation." She had her phone raised, already snapping pictures like some self-appointed enforcer. The neighbors backed away so fast you'd think I was contagious. I gritted my teeth. You can't keep shutting everyone down like this. Oh, I can, she said coolly. And I will. We don't need rule breakers setting examples here. The next day, another notice arrived. Violation. Unauthorized solicitation. Fine. $500. I slammed the paper on the kitchen counter, pacing back and forth. It was clear now. This wasn't about rules. This was personal. Karen had declared war, and Greg was her general. But the final straw came a week later. I found an anonymous letter shoved under my door. The handwriting was messy, the words chilling. Stop causing trouble. People who side with you will regret it. No one wants to be seen with a rule breaker. I looked out the window and saw blinds shifting across the street. Neighbors peeking, watching, afraid. That night, as I sat at the table with a pile of notices, fines, and that letter, I realized something. If I didn't fight this, they'd bury me in rules until I couldn't breathe. I picked up my phone, dialed a number, and when the voice on the other end answered, I said, "Yeah, it's time. I'm filing a lawsuit." But little did I know, the board had already planned their counterattack, one that would drag me deeper into this mess than I ever imagined. Filing the lawsuit wasn't something I took lightly. It meant money, time, and stress. But what other choice did I have? The fines kept piling up, the threats were becoming bolder, and the rules seemed to multiply by the day. If I didn't push back, I'd be buried alive in penalties until they drove me out completely. The attorney I met with, a wiry man named David, looked over the documents with raised eyebrows. "They fined you for a garage sale and suspended your trash pickup? That's creative. Illegal is the word you're looking for," I said. He smirked. "That too. But here's the problem. You're not just fighting one neighbor. You're fighting an entire board. They'll paint you as disruptive, hostile, the one stirring trouble. Are you ready for that?" I leaned forward. "I don't care what they call me. I just want them stopped." David nodded slowly. "All right then. We'll file. But once they know, expect them to come at you with everything they've got." He wasn't wrong. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. People crowded into the clubhouse, folding chairs lined up in neat rows. Greg sat at the front with the board, Karen beside him, smug as ever. When I walked in, conversations hushed. Some neighbors gave me encouraging nods. Others avoided eye contact completely. Greg tapped the microphone. "We have an unfortunate matter to address tonight. One resident has decided to file a lawsuit against this community, accusing us of harassment. Let's be clear, this is an attack not just on the board, but on all of you." A murmur spread through the room. He let it simmer before continuing. "We strive to protect property values, safety, and order. But when one person refuses to follow the rules, it puts everyone at risk." I stood up. "You fined me $750 for a charity garage sale. You suspended my trash pickup. You invented new rules just to shut people down. This isn't about safety or values. It's about control." Karen leaned toward the microphone, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're harassing the community. You wander the neighborhood with your petitions, trying to turn good families against their board. You bring outsiders in with your sales, strangers on our streets. People are scared of you." "Scared of me?" I barked out a laugh. "I'm not the one sending anonymous letters threatening neighbors for talking to me. That's on you and your friends." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face flushed red, but Greg quickly jumped in. "Enough. You're out of order. Security, please escort him out." Two men in matching polo shirts stepped forward. I held up my hands. "I'll go, but this isn't over." As I walked out, I caught glimpses of neighbors whispering. Some looked sympathetic, others looked like they wanted me gone yesterday. The division was clear, and exactly what Karen wanted. The following week, I noticed a shift. People I used to wave at now crossed the street to avoid me. Kids who had played at the lemonade stand were no longer allowed near my yard. Even the mailman hesitated, dropping envelopes quickly and hurrying off. One night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back down. This community doesn't want you." I showed David the text at our next meeting. He frowned. "They're building a campaign against you, making it seem like you're the threat. If we push forward, we'll need evidence, witnesses, documentation." "Can anyone stand up for you?" I hesitated. "They're scared." Karen made sure of it. He scribbled something on his notepad. "Then we'll subpoena them. They won't have a choice." I left his office with a mix of determination and dread. Every step felt like sinking deeper into quicksand, but there was no turning back. 2 days later, Greg knocked on my door. When I opened it, he wasn't smiling. "Lawsuits make enemies," he said flatly. "Are you sure this is the hill you want to die on?" I stared him down. "You think I'm scared of you? You think I'll just roll over?" "No, I'm not playing your game anymore." He leaned closer, voice dropping low. "Karen doesn't lose, and if you keep this up, neither will I." He turned and walked off, leaving those words to rot in my head. That night, as I set out my trash, ignoring their suspension, I noticed something. The bins up and down the street had been emptied, but mine remained full. The truck had skipped my house again. The stench was already bad, and it was clear they wanted to humiliate me in front of the whole neighborhood. The next morning, I found another anonymous letter stuck to my windshield. "Court won't save you. Everyone's watching. Stop now." I was so angry I could barely breathe. I stormed into the next board meeting uninvited, slamming the letter onto the table in front of Greg and Karen. "You think this scares me? You think I'll back down? If anything, this proves my case. Harassment, intimidation, abuse of power. Keep it coming. It all goes into evidence." Karen's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of unease. She hissed under her breath, "You don't know who you're dealing with." Greg cleared his throat, trying to maintain control. "You're making baseless accusations. We'll let the court decide." "Oh, we will," I shot back. "And when we get there, you'll regret underestimating me." I stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. My heart pounded, but deep down, I knew I had hit a nerve. Still, the pressure was mounting. Neighbors avoided me more than ever. Letters kept coming. The fines had climbed past $2,000, and my lawyer's retainer was draining my savings. Late one night, as I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of notices and documents, I heard a noise outside. A car door slamming, then voices. I crept to the window and peered out. 3 board members stood at the end of my driveway, Karen among them, whispering fiercely. One pointed toward my house. Karen shook her head, then glanced up at my window. Our eyes met for a split second before she smirked. They weren't just playing games anymore. They were plotting something, and whatever it was, I knew it would make everything that had already happened look like child's play. The night I caught them whispering at the end of my driveway, I barely slept. Every creak of the house had me on edge. Every passing car made me jump. By morning, I felt wrung out but more determined than ever. If they wanted war, I'd give them war. The first move came fast. An envelope arrived, thicker than the usual notices. Inside was a formal declaration. Board action. Motion to censure resident for repeated violations, harassment of board members, and creating a hostile environment within the community. They weren't just fining me anymore. They were branding me as an enemy of the neighborhood. And the language was nasty. It accused me of threatening Karen, disturbing peace, even intimidating children. All lies, but written down in official board stationery like gospel truth. I stormed over to David's office, slapping the papers onto his desk. "They're manufacturing garbage now," he read quietly, lips pressed tight. "This is worse than I thought. They're trying to build a narrative for the court, painting you as the aggressor. If the judge believes any of this, it'll be an uphill battle. So what do? We go on offense. We dig into their finances, their emails, their board minutes. If they've bent the rules for themselves, we'll find it." That gave me some hope. But hope didn't last long. The next HOA meeting turned into a circus. Greg stood at the front, papers in hand. "We've had ongoing issues with one resident," he announced, glancing straight at me. "The board has unanimously voted to censure him. This is to protect the peace and safety of the community." Karen grabbed the mic, practically glowing. "We've endured constant hostility. He storms into meetings, insults board members, and stirs up division. Children feel unsafe walking past his house. Families feel harassed. We had no choice." Neighbors shifted in their seats. A few clapped. Others just looked uncomfortable. I stood up, my voice cutting through the room. "You're all being lied to. I've never threatened anyone. The only harassment happening is coming from this board. They're targeting me because I dared to stand up to them." Karen sneered. "There he goes again, playing the victim." I raised the anonymous letters high for everyone to see. These came to me, telling me to back down, threatening my neighbors for even talking to me. "Does that sound like I'm the bully?" Murmurs rippled through the room. Greg's face tightened, and he quickly grabbed the microphone. "That's irrelevant. These meetings are for board business, not theatrics." "You mean not for the truth?" I shot back. The room erupted, some shouting at me to sit down, others demanding answers from the board. Greg banged the gavel repeatedly, red-faced. "Order! Order!" I walked out before I exploded, but I knew I'd rattled them. The cracks were showing. That night, a knock came at my door. I hesitated, half expecting another notice. But when I opened it, it was my neighbor, Lisa. She looked nervous, glancing around before stepping inside. "I can't stay long," she whispered. "But I need to tell you something." She handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was a photocopy of an email chain. At the top, from Karen, the email read, "We need to make sure no one supports him. Spread the word he's dangerous, unstable. If people think he's a threat, they'll stay away." My jaw clenched. "So they're orchestrating it." Lisa nodded quickly. "Greg told us at the last private board session that the goal was to drive you out before this lawsuit gains traction. They're scared of what you'll uncover." I stared at her. "Will you testify?" She shook her head, eyes wide with fear. "I can't. They'll come for me next. I'm sorry." She slipped out the door before I could say more. Still, I now had proof. The next morning, David leaned back in his chair as I handed him the copy. He grinned for the first time since we started. "This is gold. It shows intent, conspiracy to defame you. If we get the original emails through discovery, they're finished." But of course, Karen wasn't about to go down without a fight. 2 days later, a sheriff's deputy knocked at my door. He handed me a restraining order filed by Karen. According to her sworn statement, I'd been lurking near her home, shouting threats, and making her feel unsafe. I was so stunned I laughed. "This is insane. I've barely left my own property except to go to meetings." The deputy shrugged. "Take it up with the court. Until then, you stay 200 feet away from her." David was furious when I told him. "They're pulling every trick in the book. This is intimidation by legal harassment. But it also shows they're desperate. Desperation makes mistakes." The court date loomed, tension building like a storm. Meanwhile, the harassment escalated. Someone spray-painted "rule breaker" across my driveway one night. Another morning, I found my mailbox smashed in. No one saw anything, no cameras caught it. But the worst blow came when Greg himself showed up again, smirking like he'd already won. "Looks like you're losing ground," he said casually, glancing at the wrecked mailbox. "This neighborhood has a way of dealing with people who don't fit in." I stepped toward him. "You think you scare me? You're the one who should be scared." When the court sees those emails, his smirk faltered, just for a second, before snapping back. "Careful, you wouldn't want more unfortunate incidents." I slammed the door in his face, hands shaking with rage. That night, I sat staring at the restraining order, the graffiti, the smashed mailbox. Every tactic they had was being thrown at me. But they didn't realize one thing: I wasn't backing down. A week later, we finally stood in court. The board sat together like a smug little army, Karen front and center with her lawyer whispering in her ear. Greg avoided my gaze, but I could see the tension in his jaw. David stood and began to speak, laying out the timeline of harassment, the bogus fines, the anonymous letters. Then he pulled out Lisa's photocopy and slid it to the judge. "Here's an email where board members actively conspired to destroy my client's reputation and silence his voice. We will request full discovery of the board's communications, which I believe will reveal even more." Karen's lawyer jumped up, objecting loudly, but the judge waved him off. "If this document is authentic, the board will be required to produce the originals." Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Karen's face went pale. Greg's lips tightened into a thin line. For the first time, they looked cornered. But just as I thought the tide had turned, the judge leaned forward and spoke words that froze my blood. "We'll proceed with discovery. But in the meantime, given the level of conflict and alleged threats, I am considering placing this entire neighborhood under a court-appointed receiver to manage the HOA until this is resolved." The courtroom erupted. Karen jumped to her feet, shouting. Greg's lawyer protested. David looked stunned. And me? My mind raced. A receiver meant stripping the board of their power. But it also meant things were about to get messier than I had ever imagined. The judge's words hung in the air like a bomb. A court-appointed receiver. That meant the board would lose all power until the case was resolved. Their decisions under the control of someone neutral. The room erupted into chaos. Karen shouting at her lawyer, Greg pounding the table, neighbors whispering in shock. For the first time since this started, I felt the balance shift. The receiver, a woman named Janice, took over within 2 weeks. She was sharp, blunt, and didn't care about neighborhood politics. The first thing she did was demand complete access to board records, emails, financials, meeting minutes. Greg and Karen fought her every step, but the court order left them no choice. It didn't take long for cracks to show. One afternoon, David called me. "You're not going to believe this," he said, almost laughing. "The receiver just sent over preliminary findings. They've been funneling HOA funds into personal expenses." "What kind of expenses?" He read from the report. Greg billed the association for landscaping at his private property across town. Karen charged spa treatments, restaurant bills, even a family vacation to Florida. All listed as community outreach. I gripped the phone tighter. So they were robbing us the whole time. Yep, and now it's on record. Word spread fast. Neighbors who had kept their distance suddenly started knocking on my door, whispering apologies. "We didn't know," one said. "They scared us into silence." "But if this is true," another shook her head. "I paid extra fees last year for legal reserves. Now I find out it went to Karen's plane tickets. They're finished." And they were. The next HOA meeting under Janice's supervision was nothing short of a public execution. The clubhouse overflowed with residents. Janice stood at the front, a stack of papers in her hands. Greg and Karen sat stiffly in the corner, pale and sweating. Janice cleared her throat. "After reviewing the board's financials, we found extensive misuse of funds, unauthorized personal expenses, false billing, and deliberate attempts to conceal transactions from the community. These are serious breaches of fiduciary duty." Gasps filled the room. People turned, glaring at Karen and Greg. Someone shouted, "You stole from us." Another yelled, "Resign." Karen jumped to her feet, her voice shrill. "This is a misunderstanding. Everything was approved." "No, it wasn't." Janice cut her off. "In fact, the email showed deliberate collusion between you two to cover it up." She held up a page and read aloud. "If anyone asks, we'll call it outreach. No one will question it." Karen's face crumpled. Greg tried to speak, but the crowd drowned him out with shouts and jeers. For years, they'd ruled through fear and manipulation. Now, stripped bare, they had nothing. David leaned over and whispered, "This is over. They're cooked." The judge didn't wait long. With Janice's report as evidence, the court ruled decisively. Greg and Karen were removed from the board permanently, barred from serving on any HOA again. They were ordered to repay the stolen funds in full, plus penalties. And worse, for them at least, the case was referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. The look on Karen's face when the ruling came down was pure devastation. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Greg sat with his head in his hands. The fight drained from him. Neighbors who once feared them now lined up to vent their rage. "You ruined this community. You threatened us. You lied about everything." Karen tried to leave the meeting, but people blocked her path, hurling accusations until she pushed past in tears. Greg followed, silent, shoulders slumped. For the first time in months, the air felt different. Lighter, but not happy. Not for me, because even though I'd won, the scars were deep. My reputation had been dragged through the mud. Neighbors still looked at me with caution, unsure whether to see me as a fighter or a troublemaker. The lawsuit drained my savings. The threats, the vandalism, the months of stress, it all left me hollow. That night, sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by empty coffee cups and stacks of papers, I thought about the beginning. All of this had started with a simple garage sale for the animal shelter. Something meant to help, twisted into a nightmare because of Karen's obsession with control. Greg lost his position. Karen lost her power. The HOA as it existed was dismantled, replaced with strict oversight. They were destroyed, just like they had tried to destroy me. But there was no victory parade, no celebration. The neighborhood was fractured, trust was gone, and I knew, even with Karen and Greg out, nothing would ever feel the same. Weeks later, I saw Karen for the last time. She was standing in her driveway, boxes piled high. For sale, sign jammed into the yard. She caught my eye across the street, and for a moment, her face twisted with pure hatred. Then she looked away, climbing into her car and slamming the door. Greg moved not long after. His house sold quietly, no farewell to anyone. Their empire of petty rules and fake power crumbled beneath them. The HOA was destroyed, but so was the idea that this place had ever been a community. And as I sat on my porch one evening, the sun dipping low, I realized something. Sometimes you win, sometimes you even destroy the people who tried to destroy you. But in the end, All that's left are the ashes of what they burned along the way.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share.